And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Decades after torture allegations were first leveled against the former Chicago police commander Jon Burge, a federal jury has found him guilty of lying about torturing prisoners into making confessions. Burge has long been accused of overseeing the systematic torture of more than 100 African-American men. The police department fired him in 1993 for mistreatment of a suspect, but did not press charges. More than a decade later, Cook County prosecutors looked into the torture allegations and found that although there was evidence to show torture had occurred, the statute of limitations had expired. 2 years ago, federal prosecutors finally brought charges against Burge, not for torture, but for lying about it. On Monday afternoon, after a 5-week trial, Jon Burge was found guilty on all counts of perjury and obstruction of justice for lying about the abuse. He could face up to 45 years in prison. Outside the courthouse, the verdict drew a visibly emotional response from one of the men who'd been tortured under Burge, Mark Clements.
And these people stole my life. I hate to tell you the truth. I sat in a prison cell and I prayed for this day. Today is a victory for every poor person. I was 16 years old. This is America. 16 years old. What are we going to do about other people who are sitting in those prisons? And I'm sorry if I'm offending anyone, but it's out.
This was Mark Clements' response when reporters asked him how he felt.
They relieve that finally at least one of these people are now going to finally feel the pain. My daughter is 29 years old. I missed all those years with my daughter, sitting in those prison cells for a crime I did not commit. I do not feel sorry for Jon Burge. That's all I have to say.
Mark Clements, one of the dozens of men who were tortured under former Chicago Police Commander Jon Burge. I'm joined now from Chicago by Flint Taylor, an attorney with the People's Law Office in Chicago, who's represented many of the torture victims. Welcome to Democracy Now! Your response to the guilty verdict, Flint Taylor.
It was a wonderful victory for the African-American community and all people here in Chicago who have fought so long and so hard for justice. This fight, as you've mentioned, has gone on for decades. It's a human rights victory that should be understood across the entire country. Because here in Chicago, we've now done something after 30 years of struggle that has not happened anywhere else. And that is, we have a conviction of a torturer, a United States torturer. And that is what the lesson needs to be taken by the Obama administration, who seems so leery to prosecute people like Cheney and people under his command for torture abroad by the U.S. Now we have an example. And actually, it was a Republican prosecutor who did this. So I think that we all across this country should take a lesson from Chicago. But we're also saying, and this struggle has to continue, because there are many men under the command of Jon Burge who are being investigated, who need to be indicted. There are men behind prison bars still who are there because of the torture, by tortured confessions. We need to have a federal statute that says that torture is a crime akin to other human rights violations that has no statute of limitations, so future Burges cannot end up being prosecuted only for perjury and not for the torture that happened. And we need to have full compensation by the city for the men, many of whom have never had or cannot have lawsuits, men who came forward and are the true heroes of this peace and this prosecution, the men who testified against Burge and who were ripped from pillar to post by his lawyer in a very racist way and presented to this jury that it was okay to torture them. It's okay to torture poor black men who are charged with crimes, who may have been in street gangs. And this jury, which only had one African American on it, spoke loudly and said no. It's not right to torture. Doesn't matter if you're poor and black and a criminal. And I think the message is it doesn't matter if you're a terrorist either, or an alleged terrorist, that we cannot countenance torture in this country or by this country. And until all people who torture and all those people who are responsible for torturing are brought to justice, the conscience of Chicago and the conscience of this country cannot be cleansed.
Last month, just as the trial was beginning, I spoke to Darrell Cannon, one of the dozens of men to come forward with allegations of abuse at the hands of the Chicago police. He says police tortured him in 1983 and forced him to confess to a murder he didn't commit. He spent more than 20 years in prison, but after a hearing on his tortured confession, prosecutors dismissed his case in 2004. Now he's suing Chicago for wrongful conviction. In this clip, he's describing the torture he was subjected to by the Chicago police under Jon Burge's command.
By them not being successful in getting what they wanted out of me, they did a third treatment, which was they put me in the back seat of a detective car. They unhandcuffed my cuffs from behind, put them in front. Jon Burge had a gun to my head and told me don't move when they redid the handcuffs. They put me sideways in the back seat of a detective car and made me lay down across the seat. They pulled my pants and my shorts down, and that's when Burns took an electric caliper, turned it on, and proceeded to shock me on my testicles. They did this what seems like forever with me, but it wasn't that long. At one point, I was able to kick the caliper out of the detective's hands, and that knocked the batteries out. He got the batteries, put them back in. One of them tried to take his feet and put it on top of one of my feet. The other one did the same thing to stop me from kicking. Then this is when they started using the electric caliper on me again, while telling me that they knew that I wasn't the one they wanted, but I had the information that could lead them to the other person that they wanted. They continued to do this until finally I agreed to tell them anything they wanted to hear. Anything. It didn't matter to me. You know, if they said, did your mother do it? Yes. Because the diabolical treatment that I received was such that I had never in my life experienced anything like this. I didn't even know anything like this here existed in the United States.
I also want to turn to an interview I did in 2006 with David Bates, who says he was tortured by men under Burge's command. This is how he described what happened to him.
I believe it was October 28th or 29th of 1983 when a few officers knocked on my mom's door and announced that they were police officers and let my mom know that I'll be taken away and that I'll be coming home shortly. There was supposed to be some questions regarding the case. Of course, I got to the police station. I was questioned. I let the officers or detectives know that I had nothing to do with the case. I knew nothing. This went on for 2 days. At that time, it was 5 sessions of torture, starting with 2 slaps and kicks and threats. There was 2 particular sessions of torture that was very devastating, which a plastic bag was placed over my head. I was punched and kicked, and I'll tell you, when you talk about torture, you're talking about individuals who, most part, were young, had few brushes with the law, but never in a million years thought that they would have a plastic bag placed over their head. More importantly, the torture has never been resolved. No one has ever owned up to the torture. So we have hundreds of individuals who have psychologically been warped, been destroyed. There's never been any clinical resolution to the torture. No one has owned up to it.
That was Darrell Cannon. We talked to him in 2006.